I've been asked by a fellow YouTuber, Adi Pullen, to make a special video focusing on how to oil our model's motors and why. Do check out Adi's channel, there's a lot of good stuff going on there. Put a link here and in the description of this video. No matter the type of model, if it has a motor fitted, at some time during its life it will need to be re-lubricated. The motor bearings at each end of an armature shaft are under a lot of pressure, not just from the high-speed shaft rotating within them, but also significant thrust forces from where the worm and pinion or gear set engage. Most motor bearings are made from sintered bronze. What does that mean? Well, sintered bronze bearings are self-lubricating and almost maintenance-free. The sintered bronze bearings consist of a porous bronze matrix impregnated with lubricant, which is applied during manufacture. So, oiling your motor is not something you have to do very often. I usually wait for a change in the sound from the motor before considering it. Older Triang and Hornby types will need more regular attention, however. Let's look closely at some of my spare motors. I've selected 4 common types, including a Coreless motor. The key thing when lubricating motors is to select an appropriate oil, and to that end you could try Labelle 108, which is safe for most of our motors, Labelle 102 for older motors, or Hob-e-Lube HL663 medium oil for most motors, or Hob-e-Lube HL662 light oil for coreless and fine motors. Both these products come with built-in applicators, but even these are too crude for some modern motors. So we now come on to the most important part. Remember this, less is best. When it comes to lubricating motors, less is best, and here's the reason. I have here an old motor that I've stripped down. Actually, it's the one from my Hornby S15 saga that some of you may remember. Motors work by having electrical power switched from one coil to the next via a special round switch called a commutator. The motor brushes slide on the commutator, distributing power depending on how many poles or coils your motor has. Each pole must be energized and switched off just as the next coil is energized. This action is what causes the motors to spin, as each coil reacts against the permanent magnet in the motor body. Okay, Coreless motors work slightly differently, but for our purposes let's say they're all the same. It's probably easier to see on this older Triang XO4 motor. Here are the coils or poles, here is the permanent magnet, and here is the commutator with the 2 motor brushes spaced evenly on it. Now, particularly at the point the motor brushes are located, you can see where this is by observing where the wires of the motor connect. If you were to place more oil than the bearing can absorb or hold, the oil will track along the motor shaft and get onto the commutator. When this happens, it will cause a build-up of burnt oil on the commutator and between its sections, causing a short circuit. It can also soften the motor brushes, making them crumble. Oil on the commutator or brushes is really bad news and often results in a dead motor. But we do still need to apply oil to the bearings nearest to the brushes. What I suggest is you get yourself a fine needle from a sewing kit. Dispense some of your chosen oil into a small container. Dip the needle into this and very carefully apply the oil from the needle to the motor bearing nearest the brushes. You can do the same for the other end of the motor, but it's not as critical, and you can even dispense direct from the applicator. Even the large Triang motors need a variation of this theme, in that either use a paperclip to deliver the oil or go very carefully with the supplied applicators. After all, it's easy to clean the commutator of XO4 types. When oiling older Triang or Hornby motors and even Wren, there are sometimes felt pads around the bearings. You can put a drop or 2 of oil onto these pads and it will track carefully onto the motor bearing as required. Now we must not forget the so-called pancake motors fitted to Lima and older Hornby models. Great care must be taken to only apply a tiny amount of oil between the motor brushes on the motor bearings, because oil easily finds its way onto the large flat commutator. Annoyingly, one of the most common reasons for a poor running pancake motor is the lack of oil on the bearings. I tend to use Labelle 102 gear lube on these bearings, as it's both thicker and more inert if it does track. I hope this has been helpful to the intended audience. Remember, there are many detailed loco service guides to be found on Model Railways Unlimited, and I'm always open to new guide requests. Cheers for now.